Eddie, could you quickly explain why we structured the pyramid in this way and why fundamentals comes before adoption, which comes before optimization, which comes before amplification?
Everybody's excited about all these fancy new AI tools. People have been excited about analytics and using data and analyzing the data to find ways to improve go-to-market for a long time. And so we put both of those things at the top of the pyramid. And the reason for that is those things don't work if you don't have the foundation in place. If the data in our pipeline is junk, if our reps don't know what a qualified deal is or when to enter it into the CRM, then when we layer AI and analytics on top of that, we are going to have very limited benefits. And so the first step in go-to-market is to say, what are our basic steps? And so now you got your team executing consistently, and you're just not dropping balls that you would otherwise drop because people are just skipping steps that leadership knows they shouldn't skip, but they just haven't been able to create a repeatable process that people are executing consistently. Welcome to Go-to-Market Science, the podcast for CROs and revenue leaders scaling mature B2B companies. There's an art and there's a science to go-to-market, and we're obsessed with the science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, from what we're learning working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. If this podcast delivers value, we'd love a 5-star rating and a follow. Now let's get into it.
Welcome back to Go-to-Market Science. I'm Rachael Buchert, and I'm here today with Eddie Reynolds, our CEO and founder. And today we're talking about the Go-to-Market Efficiency Pyramid Framework, V3.0. So, first of all, hey, Eddie, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. All right, Eddie, so give us a breakdown of what the pyramid is and how it's used to help revenue leaders and kind of why we've evolved it into this third version.
Awesome. Happy to dive into that. So first, if anybody's not already familiar with this, it's our core pillar content. It forms the basis of all of the content that we put out there. It also forms the basis of how we do go-to-market strategy and RevOps for our clients. And the reason we created this is, and I'll share a tangible story. I remember I went into a whiteboarding session with an executive team where we were trying to figure out how to find things that weren't working in their go-to-market and how to fix them so they could drive more revenue. And we had this problem over here with their outbound engine, and this problem with how they're managing pipeline, and this problem over here with renewals. And it just made your head spin, right? I'm standing in front of this whiteboard and I've got all these problems outlined, and I left the meeting feeling like it was a waste of everyone's time. We needed a way to figure out how to prioritize things. And so we developed this go-to-market efficiency pyramid with 4 layers where we're looking at this and saying, what is the foundation of go-to-market? And that foundation, the first layer is called fundamentals, and the second layer is called adoption. The fundamentals are basically what are the definitions and process of the go-to-market process that your team needs to execute. So for example, who's your ICP and your buyer personas? If we're talking about outbound, what are the basic steps to run outbound prospecting? And then how can we build that into our tools? That's the fundamentals of the go-to-market efficiency pyramid. Adoption is getting people to actually go and execute that consistently. Training and enablement, having reporting so you can see that people are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, and then having a regular cadence of management review. So we looked at this and we said, okay, if we identify all of these problems, we now have a framework where we can say, what are those problems that are at the foundation of go-to-market that we need to fix first before we go fix other things? So the other 2 layers are optimization and amplification, and that's where all the fancy analytics and the AI lie. And we set that at the top of the pyramid because we want to make sure we get the foundation in place before moving on to those more advanced things that take more time and have more complexity and don't work if you don't have the foundation in place.
Awesome. And for me, I know we started off with the pyramid being a visualization for someone's go-to-market ops maturity level. But for me, it's kind of evolved into a way to find quick wins in go-to-market ops and illuminate those gaps that you have that you might have been overlooked while you're trying to optimize things, while you're trying to implement AI, and kind of take a step back and get down to the basics and then rebuild from a better place that you can scale from.
That's exactly it. And so we're on version 3 right now. And so I want to answer the second part of your question, which was, what's different about version 3? Why have we updated the go-to-market efficiency pyramid now a third time? Well, what I described, the go-to-market efficiency pyramid that I described, was the way that we originally built this. I described a couple tweaks there, but the original version of this was just one pyramid for all of go-to-market. In version 2, we broke this down into different areas of go-to-market: inbound, outbound, pipeline management, and then customer success. And so what that allowed us to do would be to go in and talk to a CRO and say, if you could improve one area of your business and only one area, what would it be? Would it be your ability to generate pipeline via outbound, or would it be your ability to close deals that you've generated from outbound or inbound or whatever channel? And this is really helpful because we would narrow in on that, and the CRO would say, well, I really, really want to fix my outbound program. And we could focus in on that particular pyramid, and we could say, here are the fundamental things that you need to have an efficient outbound process. And here's how we drive adoption. And then if we get past that, here's how we optimize that and amplify that. That was really helpful, but we were missing some key go-to-market motions. We were missing ABM Allbound, which we created a pyramid for, but we hadn't yet added it to the framework. We were missing partners and channel, and we're still missing PLG and community, but we added that in. We touched on it in the framework, but we didn't build out those pyramids because we don't have a lot of expertise there and don't spend a lot of time working with our clients on those particular go-to-market motions. We also wanted to break down CS because CS is so big. And so I kind of wanted to break it down into onboarding and implementation, into retention, and then into expansion. We don't spend a lot of time in onboarding and implementation. We're not necessarily experts there. So I wanted to skip over that, kind of included it in retention or touched on it. And then we have retention and expansion. And so those break down separately so that we can really think clearly. For example, if we want to improve our expansion efforts, what are those specific elements in fundamentals, adoption, optimization, and amplification? And so now we've got 7 different pyramids. We went back to the first pyramid and we said, how do we make this more standardized? What are the standard elements across all of go-to-market that we need? And so we redid that, and that's probably where we'll go next. And we now have a framework that I'm really excited about because that gives us the ability to look holistically across all go-to-market and also zoom in on one particular area of go-to-market with extremely specific and tangible examples of things that we need to make that particular motion work.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into each of these maturity stages, Eddie, could you quickly explain why we structured the framework in this way and why, fundamentals comes before adoption, which comes before optimization, which comes before amplification?
Well, let's just use a tangible example, right? So everybody's excited about all these fancy new AI tools. People have been excited about analytics and using data and analyzing the data to find ways to improve go-to-market for a long time. And so we put both of those things at the top of the pyramid. And the reason for that is those things don't work if you don't have the foundation in place. So for example, let's say that I want to use AI to analyze my pipeline and look at our close rates and try to forecast. Well, if the data in our pipeline is junk, if our reps don't know what a qualified deal is or when to enter it into the CRM, if they're not moving things through stages in the right way, if they're missing steps and losing deals because in their sales process, they're not saying and doing the right things, then when we layer AI and analytics on top of that, we are going to have, very limited benefits, right? The AI is not going to be able to magically predict what our forecast is going to be if we're feeding it bad data. If we're doing more basic reporting, we're not going to be able to understand what's working and not working when our team is not even executing our sales process consistently. And so the first step in go-to-market is to say, what are our basic steps? And this is something we run into, maybe because we talk about it a lot, but we have CRO after CRO come to us and they said, we're having trouble with outbound. And we ask, do you have these fundamentals in place? Do you have the team consistently executing these things? And the answer inevitably is no. And we say, okay, great. There's all kinds of things we can do, all kinds of fancy tools that we can, put in place. But before we do that, we need to just figure out what these basic things are and get those in place. And the good news is, depending on the size of the team, you can get this stuff in place really fast, really, really fast, in weeks or months, depending on the size of the team. And then you can go through each area of go-to-market and have that in place. And this is also where you get the majority of the benefit. It's the 20% of the work and the 80% of the benefit by getting this foundation in place. Because now you got your team executing consistently and you're just not dropping balls that you would otherwise drop because people are just skipping steps that leadership knows they shouldn't skip, but they just haven't been able to create a repeatable process that people are executing consistently.
Mhm. And I want to make it clear, like when we say getting these fundamentals in place, we know that most companies and most people listening to this are working at a company where, they have fundamentals in place. They know their ICP, they kind of know their personas. They have processes, most likely, if you're 30, 50 million plus ARR company. But a thing a lot of companies miss that we find is they've never gone back and looked at these things again, or looked at them by product or by segment, or talked to their customers and talked to their sales team and customer success, and really found out, like, is this our actual ICP? Is this our actual buyer persona? Are we targeting them the right way? Or even, do we have these processes written somewhere that anyone can go look up and reference if they need to? Are these processes built into the CRM? Like, maybe we have them and everyone kind of knows what it is, but it's not built into the CRM. So there aren't any of these guardrails keeping your reps in check and making sure that they're following the criteria before they can physically move, on to the next step in Salesforce.
I think that's true in many cases, but I also think what's also true is that these companies don't have that stuff in place. As an example, let's say that we go to 5 sales reps and we ask them, what is our ICP? What are our buyer personas? What does it mean for a deal to be qualified to enter pipeline? What are the stages in our sales process, and what do you need to do in each stage? We could also just literally look at like a close report. And I've done this myself, and I've looked at companies we've worked with where one rep has an 85% close rate and another rep has a 10% close rate. What does that imply? What does that mean? Nobody is so good that they're closing 85% of their deals. What's happening is that rep is entering deals once they have a verbal. So they either don't know when a deal should actually be entered into pipeline, or they just are simply not doing it. The other rep is basically taking every single person they meet with and throwing them into the pipeline, whether they're qualified or not, because they either don't know or don't follow any type of qualification criteria. And we see this again and again and again. And so when you think about that problem, then you say, well, we have $50 million or $100 million of pipeline. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody trusts it. Well, your $100 million is a combination of Jane over here, who doesn't put anything into the pipeline until it's ready to close, and Bob over here, who puts everybody that he speaks with into pipeline.
All right. So let's go through these stages step by step now. I know we already kind of talked about fundamentals and, we talked a little bit about each of them, but let's go into a little bit deeper. And then we can just breeze through the rest of the 7 pyramids, because a lot of things carry over and are the same among each kind of area and go-to-market that we look at, with some key differences. So Eddie, first, let's dive deeper into fundamentals.
So, and keep in mind, these are examples. So when we do a diagnostic with a client, we have over 150 different things we look at. At this point with 7 pyramids, a lot of those 150 things are on here, but we try to pick 3 bullet points per layer. So it's not all inclusive. Some of these are examples. There's definitely stuff that's missing, but it's a pretty good, it covers things pretty well. So for fundamentals, the go-to-market efficiency pyramid has 3 things in the fundamental stage: ICP and buyer personas by product. So if you're selling different products to different types of buyers, we need to know who the buyer is for each of those products. We then need to map out our customer journey and our go-to-market process. What is the step-by-step process to deliver the customer journey that our customers want? And then lastly, how do we build that process into the systems? Or I really should say that we have built that process into the systems in order to say we've got the fundamentals in place. The next stage is adoption. Adoption is just getting our team to actually execute that process consistently. So first, we need to provide training and enablement. Then we need full reporting and dashboards to first see if our team is actually executing. And then secondly, to see if that's working. And then thirdly, we need a regular cadence of management to review those reports and those dashboards to hold the team accountable and drive them to execute consistently. That's the adoption phase. And when we have that foundation in place, and we have the reports that show that, for example, let's talk about our pipeline. We're doing pipeline inspection on a regular basis, and we can confidently say the pipeline might not be perfect, but for the most part, reps know what a qualified deal is. They have the right deals in the pipeline. They know when to take deals out and lost them out. And when we say we have $50 million in pipeline, we have $50 million in pipeline. That's a prerequisite to moving into optimization, which is the next layer. And optimization is really just using our data to figure out what's working and what's not, and then trying to find ways to optimize our go-to-market motion based on what the data is telling us. So that starts with go-to-market insights. That requires that foundation that we have data we can trust. And then it also requires that we have an individual with the right skills and experience and the right time and focus to sit down and go through the reports and try to understand what's working and what's not and translating those into insights. In a best case scenario, that's your VP of go-to-market strategy and operations. That's also your CRO. They're both doing that. They're both living in the data and they're looking to see what's working and what's not working. You then have a go-to-market council meeting where the VP of go-to-market strategy and operations would organize and run this meeting, and they would bring the CRO, CMO, head of customer success, possibly the CFO, product leaders, and they would go through the data and they would say for each different motion, like this is what's working, this is what's not working, we're generating this much pipeline, we're closing this many deals, we're retaining and growing customers in this way. Here's what we are seeing in the data is working or not working and what we recommend doing about that. And then the leadership team can decide what actions do we want to take coming off of this meeting. That can be an incredibly powerful meeting if it's done right. And then lastly, to have a third bullet point, I think there's a few examples we could have included in here, but I laid this out as attribution and forecasting. Depending on what part of go-to-market we're talking about, this might be where we start to get our marketing attribution in place, or for example, with our pipeline, this might be where we start to have a formal forecasting process. A lot of people want to start here, but what is the point of having attribution if you can't even get your reps to follow up on leads? How are you going to forecast if you can't even get your reps to keep their pipeline clean? So I think that's why we have that foundation in place. You have to have that in order to do attribution and forecasting. So that's the optimization layer. And then lastly, we have amplification. And the reason we retitled this as amplification is because what we are looking to do is to amplify what is presumably already working. Right? So this involves automation, AI data analytics, agentic AI workflow, and we could come up with dozens, if not hundreds of examples. A lot of this is going to be automation and AI, where we say, okay, we got this go-to-market motion working. We've even looked at the data and started to, find ways to optimize it. How can we amplify this? How can we use machines to help do more of this and do it better? And the prerequisite for that is we need to know what good looks like. We can't ask AI to write an email for us if we don't first know what a good email looks like, if we haven't tested that, sent that out to the world and gotten good feedback on it, right? Once we've done that, now we can start to ask, well, how might we use AI to help our reps write an email? Do we need reps to review those emails? Are we sending that out automatically? Probably wouldn't advise that, but if we know what good looks like, we can get there. If we don't know what good looks like, we're going to end up amplifying something that's not working. We're going to cause a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. And I think is not just what good looks like, but also what creates revenue impact. What is having the most, impact on our close rates, our win rates. There could be something that we're doing. Maybe we have a specific type of demo space. I was talking to somebody on the podcast a little while ago. Their company used customized demo spaces, took 8 hours for them to create it manually. Then they were able to later on use AI to cut that down to 2 minutes instead of 8 hours. So they found the thing that was a huge differentiator in their industry and the thing that was closing most of their deals. And then they were able to amplify that. But if they didn't know that was if they didn't figure out how to create that demo space, first of all, and figure out how to optimize it and know who it's for and how to do it, they would never been able to then amplify that and make it such a huge, winner with AI.
Well, let's use that as an example. I actually think we're saying the same thing. That's what I mean by what good looks like. So we have this demo space where we're spending 8 hours delivering a demo. So fundamentals, what is the process to run a sale step by step? And what's the step where we give a demo? And how do we give a good demo? What does that process look like? Okay, we've got that in place. We've got the tools built out to do that. We train the team on how to do that. We have reporting that shows how we're managing our sales process, when we've done a demo, et cetera. Management is reviewing that, giving feedback and coaching to the team. And now we move into optimization. And we start to look at our report and we say, okay, we're doing 8 hours per demo. How often are we closing deals? I mean, 8 hours is a massive investment. So When we are at the demo stage where we spend 8 hours on it, we should see a 50% win rate, 60, 70% win rate. If we're looking at 10% win rates, I would really ask, how are we justifying the expense of an 8-hour demo? Is this $1 million sale that we're making? Like, there's something really wrong here. So before I want to go and say, well, let me figure out how to do this demo in 2 minutes with AI, 2 minutes might change that. Obviously, like, that's a different scenario, but are we winning these deals, right? Presumably, the CRO you were talking to was winning those deals. And so now we've optimized this. We got that 50% win rate after the demo. This is great. Now we move to amplification, and now we've got a 50% win rate on a 2-minute demo. That's amazing. And that's what I'm talking about here. But the opposite, if we say, well, we've defined the process for a demo, and now let's use AI, and then we're getting like a 5% close rate on our entire qualified sales pipeline, that's a real problem. We don't want to amplify that.
All right. So now let's take a look at each of those 7 pyramids that we were talking about and kind of break them down pyramid by pyramid, area by area, and what's different across each area. All right, Eddie, let's start with outbound. What are the fundamental components that need to be in place before anything else can work that's kind of specific to outbound?
Sure. So before I get into outbound, one of the things that I'll say is that you're going to see a lot of things repeated across these pyramids. For example, the go-to-market council is going to show up everywhere. ICP and buyer personas is going to show up everywhere. Implementing the process into systems is going to show up everywhere. The things that are going to be unique for each motion is going to be, what does it mean to define the process? It's going to be, we shared tangible examples for that. We also shared tangible examples for like what kind of reporting you should be looking at with some of these. And then I think under the amplification, there are different examples for automation and AI that are going to be, more common use cases for each of these, right? Those are going to be the major things that stand out. Now, going back to answer your question, what's different about the outbound efficiency pyramid? What's unique about the outbound efficiency pyramid? So we have our ICP and buyer personas by product. Once we've defined that, we need to define the outbound process. And that starts with building a capacity-based territory plan, meaning we understand how many calls a rep can make in a day, whether they're an AE or an SDR. We understand how many contacts we want them to reach out to in a given account, how many times they want to reach out to each of those contacts. And then we do the math to figure out how many accounts we need to assign to them in a territory. The reason this is so beneficial is if we know the number of accounts that a rep can cover, then we can use data to pick the best accounts. So if they can cover 200 accounts in a year, we find the best 200 accounts instead of giving them 2,000 accounts and letting them try to figure out who to call. That is like game changing for most outbound organizations. Then we want to build and segment that list. So if we have different types of buyers in that list of 200 accounts, as an example, and X number of contacts in those accounts, how could we segment different types of buyers so that a rep could spend an hour, a day, a week solely focused on calling one type of buyer with one type of messaging? They're going to be both faster and more effective at converting prospecting activity into meetings if they're, working on the same message for the same buyer. And then we have to define that prospecting sequence. Is it, we send an email on day 1 and then we wait 3 days and then we send another email and then we wait 4 days and then we do an email and a call? Do they need to go to the website? Do they need to read the annual report before they write the first email? Like, what is that step-by-step process for them to reach out to these prospects? That's really important that we define that. And then we build that process into the system, just like we would in any area of the go-to-market efficiency pyramid. We go into adoption, which is going to be pretty similar to what we already described. We look at, reporting, such as, how many activities, how many meetings, how much pipeline was generated, what was closed. We might also want to look at specific account coverage, how accounts are moving through the funnel, who we've called in each account, how we're covering different accounts and different, roles in those accounts, et cetera. And then we move into optimization and we start looking at what's working and what's not, what messaging is working, what's not, and have our go-to-market council meeting. Finally, under amplification, the 3 examples that I thought were most relevant right now, and this could change tomorrow, were automated trigger-based cadences, having AI-driven tailored or personalized messaging, and having AI-driven account research and account scoring to help us identify which accounts to call, what we should know about these accounts, and how do we personalize this messaging so that we can maximize our conversion rates.
I think Outbound is one of the easiest examples of people jumping ahead of the pyramid and going right to amplification before they do the first steps in the beginning, because then we get spray and pray marketing. I think everyone's gotten, spammy, outbound, cold emails in their inbox where, you just got blasted. You were on a list somewhere. And they did no research into you whatsoever. Maybe they don't even know what their ICP is, let alone that you're a part of it.
Well, the worst part of it is like, let's say I've seen stats before where a company did like personalized targeted outreach and they got, I think this was more than one company. I think this was a study across many companies, and the personalized emails converted 7% of the accounts they went after. And the more like spammy stuff was 0.5%, right? I mean, that's a massive difference. It's a 14x difference. Now, if you think about it and you say, okay, like, what does that mean? Okay, we reach out to the first 1,000 accounts and we get 70 customers out of it versus 5 customers. Okay, so then if we got 5 customers out of the first 1,000 accounts, we need to move to the next 1,000. Now, our conversion rates are going to be lower. So maybe it's 4 accounts instead of 5 or 3. Then we move to the next 1,000, the next 1,000. We end up like in a race to the bottom where we're on like account number 10,000 to 11,000, and our conversion rates are virtually zero because we've burned through all the people that are really truly in our ICP. And now we're left reaching out to people that are not a fit for our product, and we're getting zero conversion rate because of that. So the solution is like, and then we have to do more and more volume, and it's like this vicious race to the bottom. If we're really thoughtful about targeting, we go back to that first batch of 1,000, or maybe it's 10,000, like, whatever that number is. I'm not trying to prescribe that for like any company. It's not one size fits all, but we really figure out who our ICP is and what our capacity is and reach out to the right people with the most effective messaging. Not only are we going to like win more customers with less effort and cost, we're also going to retain those customers more and expand those customers more. And it has a trickle down effect all the way across go-to-market.
Absolutely. That was what I was just about to say also. But yeah, you nailed it. All right, moving on to inbound. So you outlined 6 core components to the process. What are those and how are they different from our other processes?
All right. So with inbound, the first thing that I think we should do, and you could argue you would do this with outbound as well, but is to do a customer journey map. And the reason I think this is important, a lot of people are like, oh, we don't want to spend time on this. We need to move forward and start generating revenue. You can do this exercise as fast as you want. Even if you spend an hour or 2 hours doing a customer journey map, it's better than not having one because it forces you to think through like, what are the steps that folks want to follow to become our customers and to stay as our customers. That will then define like, how do we define an MQL? What is the speed to lead that we need to have? So for example, somebody goes to our website and says, I want a demo. How fast do we need to respond to them in order to win that deal? Usually the answer is really fast, like 5 minutes. And then that leads us into like, what is our inbound capacity planning? Same question, like at the end of the day, when we do all the math, how many leads or accounts can a rep follow up with in a given period of time? That'll then inform, how our lead routing process is done. And then we need to figure out our lead follow-up sequence. Are we going to follow up 5 times or 10 times on a lead? Is it email? Is it phone? Is it LinkedIn? Are we going to send them a care package in the mail? We have to figure out all of those things. And if we figure out all those things, like by definition, those are the things that we need to do to maximize our conversion rates of leads.
And I like that distinction you made in the beginning with the journey that they want to have. It's not the journey that you think that they should have, but the journey that they, instinctually need to go on in order to come to the realization that they want to be your customer.
Yes, and it's the journey they want to have and how you deliver that journey profitably, right? And so there are definitely customers out there that like what they want is unprofitable for you to give that to them. So you have to balance those two things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For the inbound efficiency pyramid, what we have for the amplification layer is AI lead enrichment and scoring. I think this is incredibly powerful. So we've got like our foundation in place, we've optimized it, we got our attribution in place, etc. And now we look at like, could we ask less of our customers when they visit our website by doing lead enrichment, whether it's just like plain Jane old automation or we're using AI? How do we improve the way that we're scoring leads or scoring accounts? The next thing is AI campaign and channel analytics. So when we did our interview with Scale Ventures, they said that this is one of the biggest things they're seeing in their portfolio. Companies that are doing this well are having massive ROI on their investment in AI, because AI is helping them to understand how their campaigns are performing. And I added in like channel analytics because I think it's just obvious. Think about how powerful that can be if you can get AI to help you understand like what's working and what's not working. And then lastly would be like the AI assisted lead response or follow-up. So let's say I go to the website and I say I want a demo. How amazing would it be if I get an AI email that's like gone to my website, researched my company, and said, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. Based on what we can see on your website, this is how we think we can help you. And by the way, like, if you would like to talk to like Bob tomorrow, here are like times that he's available, let me know and I'll send you out an invite. What we want is a human to do that within 30 seconds, right? And if a human can't do that in 30 seconds, I think there's an incredibly powerful use case for having AI do that. Quick pause. If you're getting value from this episode, I want to ask you a small favor. Take 30 seconds right now, open up the app you're listening to this on, and give us a 5-star rating. It sounds small, but it's the single biggest thing you can do to help us get conversations like this in front of more revenue leaders. While you're there, hit follow so you never miss an episode. Okay, let's get back into it.
All right, moving on to ABM/Allbound. In the framework, Eddie, you mentioned that it requires mastering both inbound and outbound and making them work together seamlessly. But what does this actually mean in practice as we look through the pyramid?
Well, I honestly do not think there's a big difference or really any difference between inbound and outbound, with one exception. Let's take our hand raiser leads. We have people that come to our website that are in our ICP and say, I would like a demo, and they fill out a form and that comes in here. Let's separate that out, right? That's pure, true inbound. And the way to address that is that you need to respond to that lead as fast as humanly possible and get them on the phone with the sales rep so they can get that demo that they wanted to see. Beyond that, all other inbound is nothing more than a signal that a person in an organization that does not want to talk to sales or is not asking to speak to sales might be willing to talk to sales and enter a sales cycle. So when we look at inbound, we are basically asking a question of who could we call that doesn't want to talk to us right now that might be open to a conversation and might enter into an evaluation cycle. That's the same question we're asking with outbound. Who's out there that doesn't know who we are, isn't asking to speak with us, isn't engaging with our content that we could call that we might have a high likelihood of converting into a sales cycle? It's the same exact question. So I beg the question of like, what is the difference between inbound and outbound in that regard? I don't really think there is. So if we move into like an ABM or an Allbound model, especially if you focus on accounts instead of, individuals, then we're just trying to answer the question of whether that account has engaged with our marketing or not, whether they're showing up in third-party intent signals, or whether they just happen to like fit our ICP and just be the best account that we want to go after. How do we prioritize all of those accounts and prospect into them? And so we need to have the elements that we just laid out in both inbound and outbound in order to do that. We need a customer journey map. We need capacity and territory planning. Most of all, we need to figure out how we would score these accounts and assign these accounts and prioritize them with all these different signals, right? Some accounts are going to show up on this list because like they're the right company, the right industry with the right revenue, and we know they would be the perfect customer for us. Others are going to show up because they've engaged our marketing. Others are going to show up because, they have third-party intent signals coming out of tools like 6sense. And then there's a combination of all three, right? So we got to figure out which accounts we want to call on and how we prioritize those accounts. We have to, of course, figure out what is that sequencing process to reach out to them. And then, of course, the speed to lead. How fast do we need to respond or reach out to these folks, especially those engaging with our marketing or triggers or anything else that is going to show up in our scoring methodology? How important is it that we move fast on those signals? Those are the big things, I think, for the process for ABM or Allbound. The next piece that I think is a little bit unique to this pyramid is what is the reporting for ABM and Allbound? One thing I think that we need to look at is what is our account coverage reporting, especially if we are looking at an account-based motion. I personally think like the most powerful thing we can be looking at is like, okay, if sales and marketing is focused on this set of accounts, how are those accounts moving through the funnel? Which of those accounts are targets? which of those accounts have engaged with our marketing or our sales, which of those accounts have moved into an active like evaluation cycle, et cetera. I mean, you can pick different stages based on what you feel is most relevant to your motion. But I think it's really powerful to look at one report and just see like, okay, we have 1,000 target accounts or 10,000 target accounts, whatever it is, or maybe 10 target accounts. How are those accounts moving through the funnel? We then, of course, want to see like what the conversions are in each of those accounts, how much pipeline we're generating, and then, of course, how much revenue we're generating from this ABM or Allbound program. Those, I think, are the big things that are sort of unique to this. The optimization is very similar, attribution, ABM insights, and go-to-market counsel. And then with amplification, a lot of similar things here. The AI account enrichment or scoring, I think that's actually really central to this. AI campaign and channel analytics, and then the AI assisted lead response follow-up. I think just like inbound, all those things are relevant to ABM.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to keep moving along to our last area in pipeline generation for the pyramid, partners and channel. So, partners and channel, they can look very different from one organization to another. But Eddie, what are the fundamentals that should be applying across the board here?
Sure. Well, let's clarify how they might be different, because I think like when you think partners could be something like what we do, which is we partner with private equity and venture capital firms, and they refer us into their portfolio companies. We're not paying them for this. They don't have any kind of like financial incentive. They just want to help their portfolio companies, and we want to convince them that we can help those portfolio companies. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, you have channel, where you're paying another organization to help sell your product. But I think the common thread here is that you can't have a partner or a channel program if you don't A, find somebody and meet with them and then convince them to become, a partner, and then B, nurture that relationship and turn that into a stream of revenue, right? Like, unlike other areas of go-to-market, with partners and channel, it's an ongoing relationship. You don't have like a one-time cycle and then you're done and you've either won or lost the deal. It's ongoing. You're trying to continue to get these deals out of these partners or channel partners. And so in order to do that well, it kind of starts with an outbound motion. Unless, of course, you have marketing, which brings in partners, which ironically we do. We have partners that come to us about 50-50 through marketing and through direct outreach. But you first want to see like, what's your capacity and territory plans? How many partners can we cover? You need to build and segment those target lists. And then most importantly, you need to define the partner engagement process. So after that initial meeting, what are we going to do for the next year, 2 years, 5 years to nurture and grow that relationship so that we can get referral after referral, or in the case of channel partners, close deal after close deal? And so that can be like a big thing to unpack. But that, ultimately, I think is the thing that you need to answer before you enter into like this particular motion. The rest of this, I think, is going to be pretty consistent with what we've already shared. And the amplification is very similar to what we shared with Outbound. Like, there might be a trigger-based sequence where a partner has suddenly become ripe for us to reach out to. Using AI to help tailor and personalize messaging, I think like with partners, that can be even more powerful because you're talking about a bigger, more complex relationship. How could AI like go through the website and analyze it and help you write messaging that's going to say, hey, I think the reason why you might benefit as a partner is we could help you out with all of these things. And then the last thing, which is unique here, is AI-driven partner deal summaries and feedback. So my personal experience, building a partner channel for the last 9 years here at USC, is partners want feedback and updates, and they want it in like a very concise, efficient way. If they've referred one of their portfolio companies to us, for example, they want feedback. How did the call go? Did we win them? Did we lose them? If we won them, like, what's going on with that customer? How are we helping them? And we have a lot of customers that we've worked with for 2, 3, 4, 5 years that the PEVC firm has referred to us. And it's difficult to like say, like, how often should we update them? How can we keep them in the loop on like what's going on and how we're adding value to their portfolio? And I think that's really important in like an evergreen relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think it's especially important in our case because, pretty much all the time when a partner company refers us to one of their portfolio companies, it's because, they have stakes in that portfolio company. They want us to help that company increase their revenue. So.
Yeah. And the thing I've always said about partners is you need 3 things for a partner. Like, number 1, they have to be working with your ICP and your buyer personas. Number 2, they have to be talking about the thing that you do on a regular basis. And number 3, they have to benefit directly from what you do. Now, that could be a financial incentive, like you're going to give them some kind of a kickback, or they're going to sell your product and they're going to make money off of it. Or in our case, hopefully we help the company improve their revenue production, and the private equity firm makes more money because now they have a bigger, more profitable company. But if they're not benefiting from the relationship, they're not going to put any effort forth, to help you. And the same thing is true with channel partners. I'm not going to sell your product if I'm not making good money on it, right? Like if I have a suite of products to sell and your product is tough to sell and I'm not talking to the right buyer, et cetera, then like I'm not going to sell your product. And so these are things that I think are critical to think through when you're building out a channel or a partner program.
Absolutely. And that might mean you have to look at your ICP again when it comes to partner/channels.
Oh, that's one thing we missed is it's not ICP, it's IPP. What is your ideal partner profile?
There you go. Yeah.
Hey, and it's really important. Like we have an ICP and an IPP defined in a document written down that we all like know and agree on because it's so important. But anyway, we got to be conscious of time. Let's move into pipeline management, huh? Pipeline management is this point that is between generating pipeline and then having a customer. So that'd be customer success, right? It's also the point between generating an expansion opportunity and closing an expansion opportunity. So when we think about pipeline management, it could be new business. It could also be expansion. To a lesser extent, it would, maybe apply or influence the renewal process. When I was at Salesforce, I did both new business and existing business, and we had the exact same process for both. We had the same stages, same qualification criteria, same questions we asked. It was pretty much exactly the same. In other organizations, you're going to have a very different sales process from new business to expansion. But what's unique about this pyramid and what we need to think about is like, what is that process? And specifically, what sales methodology do we subscribe to? And what is the sales process associated with that sales methodology? So how do we figure that out? Well, first we pick a sales methodology. And here at USC, we don't necessarily try to recommend one over the other. MEDDIC or MEDDPICC is obviously very popular right now. But you have to then translate that into the sales process. So let's say that we're going with MEDDIC, right? Well, for your particular organization, for your sales process, what does that mean for qualification criteria? Which questions in MEDDIC do you want to ask and when? And how does that influence you to decide when a deal is eligible to enter pipeline and when it's not yet ready? We need to think about what our sales stages are. We need to think about the entry and exit criteria to move a deal from one stage to the next. And then we need to think about the steps and the questions by stage. So going back to MEDDIC, which of those questions do we ask at what stage? Which of those questions do we have to have answered before we move to the next stage? That is unique to each business. And then when do we walk away and close out a deal? This is really important. If we don't answer that question, we end up with zombie pipeline. It's inflated. We say we have $200 million in pipeline and we know that we don't. We have to have that in place. If we have that in place, we now have the structure that we need to set up the tools and then to have the right pipeline reports and know what to inspect in the pipeline so that we can make sure that it's clean and accurate.
Absolutely. And pipeline management is also incredibly important because, a lot of companies and CROs, they want the new shiny thing. They want the new logos. They want more and more pipeline generation. Maybe they have, numbers they have to hit and a board hovering over them saying, get us more pipeline acquisition. But if your sales process has holes in it and your people can't close that pipeline, then you can't shovel, you can shovel as much dirt as you want to into a bucket, but if there's a giant hole in the bottom of it, you're not going to collect anything.
That's the exact problem that we see. So I talk to CROs every day, and 9 times out of 10, when I ask them what their priority is, they center in on new business and then specifically pipeline generation, usually some form of inbound or outbound. And I just say, well, look, like if we don't know what a qualified deal is, if we can't get our team to follow this process, then first, any amount of, time and money we invest in generating more pipeline is going to have, a lower ROI. And then secondly, like we don't know what good looks like. So we can't actually validate what's working and not working for inbound and outbound because we don't know whether or not like that worked to generate pipeline and we just lost the deal because we dropped the ball in pipeline management or vice versa. If we extend this to marketing and we talk about inbound, this is a real problem. If marketing is saying, well, we need to generate $100 million in pipeline, but we can't agree on what pipeline is, or they're being held accountable to revenue. And they're saying, well, the sales team isn't following up on these, deals, we need to fix that first. And the good news is you can get those fundamentals and adoption in place really, really fast. You might have like a 12-month sales cycle and it's going to take a long time to see the fruits of that labor, but you can get the sales process down and get reps following that sales process pretty quickly. And then you can go and say, okay, well, now we got the basics in place for pipeline. Now let's move into outbound. Now let's move into inbound. And so oftentimes when we're working with clients, the first 90 days we'll agree with the CRO and we'll say, let's do pipeline and outbound, or pipeline and inbound. And we're going to get the fundamentals and adoption in place so that you're not losing deals by letting things slip through the cracks. We get those, the foundation in place, and then we can come back and either optimize or amplify either of those motions, or we might move into another area of go-to-market and try to get the foundation in place there first.
So going on to customer success, first up, we have renewals. Eddie, all right, so let's get into the big differences with renewals.
So this was a hard one to put together. I mean, the key difference here is, of course, going to be the process. And there's a lot that goes into renewals, especially considering the fact that we're kind of trying to lump in onboarding and implementations together. So first, we go back to capacity planning. There are a lot of jobs to be done, and we need to know how long it takes to do those jobs and if we have enough of the right people in place. There's no point in having a process for onboarding, implementations, retention if we don't have enough people to run that process, right? Like, we're going to drop the ball because we don't have enough people, and this is a common problem in CS. Next, we need to think about account assignment. So based on that capacity, what CSMs, or if we have renewals managers or other roles, are going to be assigned to what accounts. Then we need to define that step-by-step process for retention. What is the handoff and onboarding process? If we have an implementation process, what does that look like? What is the customer health monitoring process? Meaning how do we know which customers are healthy and not healthy? What do we need to do to figure that out? What is our process to address unhealthy customers? And so let me just touch on some examples here, right? When I was at Salesforce, we had the early warning system. We had this data just piped into Salesforce showing the usage of our customers. And I could literally just see my accounts red, yellow, green. So the process for identifying an unhealthy account was very simple. In other organizations, the only way to access that is to log into the backend database that powers their product, or maybe they need to go to somebody and get a report. What is that process going to be for CS to identify unhealthy accounts? Then the process to actually address unhealthy accounts. Do we reach out to them? Do we have a QBR? In my case at Salesforce, because I was quota carrying, the way it worked for me is I would look at an account and I would say, okay, I'm probably not going to be able to sell anything to them if they're unhealthy. What I can do as a sales rep is I can try to kick the door in and call an executive and say, hey, it looks like you guys are having troubles with Salesforce. I want to bring the right resources in to help you guys turn things around. Can we make that happen? And then whether that worked or didn't work, I would hand the account off and move on. And then I try to come back 3 months later and see, did we turn that account around? Is this now something that I can sell to? And then separately, we had, customer success managers that would independently reach out and try to do the same thing. But since these weren't salespeople, sometimes they didn't have as much success kicking the door in and getting in front of an executive that really had power in the organization to make change. Okay, what next? So we want to have a process for QBRs or other regular engagement. And then, of course, we obviously last need the process to initiate and run the renewal itself. But I think we all know that if your renewal process is starting at 90 days or 30 days before the end of the contract, and you haven't done any of this other stuff ahead of time, it's too late to change anything. You can't turn an unhealthy account around in 30 days and get them to renew their contract when they're not getting any value. So it's so critical to have all these processes documented and in place, and then, of course, built into the systems. The other thing that's unique about this pyramid is the amplification. So automated health scoring. I talked to you about how we, had our system, and we've done this for clients where they're we've got our usage data in a backend database. How can we integrate this into Salesforce or some other tool where our team can see it? That's obviously really powerful. We've also worked with folks where, hey, that's a massive undertaking. Could we even just start with a red, yellow, green? You want to have somebody log into the database and mark every account red, yellow, green, and then manually go into Salesforce and mark it? It's, pretty rudimentary, but it's better than not having that, right? The next piece is AI-assisted CSM playbooks. So how can we use AI to help our CSMs figure out exactly what to do in different situations? You have to keep in mind when we're talking about an existing customer, we have a lot of data potentially. And when we have a lot of data, that's where AI can really shine by analyzing all that data and helping CSMs to, come up with conclusions and insights much faster than they would be able to do manually. And then, of course, AI-driven customer risk signals. So how can AI analyze our customers, both their usage, their customer support tickets, et cetera, to identify risk signals for churn that we need to address?
Mm-hmm. And I want to touch on the optimization part just really quick, because just like pipeline management, optimizing this area of go-to-market has ripple effects to outbound, inbound, ABM partners, all of it. Once you can see in CS, like who are the types of customers that are actually using this, who is getting the most from this, who are our champions, you can have, that feedback to the top of your funnel and the people working in pipeline generation, like target more of these types of customers. And you need to have that connective tissue and those feedback loops all working in tandem so you can continuously be optimizing through the entire go-to-market organization.
Absolutely. And that's one of the real powers of having a true go-to-market council meeting, where if we've got the right people in the room and they're saying, hey, these customers are renewing with us, these customers are churning, these customers are really difficult to make happy. And ideally, if we have a CRO that spans new business and customer success, that's where that CRO can make a decision and say, okay, we need to shift focus in new business and try to land more of these customers that are easier and cheaper to, retain and make happy.
All right, moving on to expansion. Eddie, let's talk a little bit about expansion. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of similarities with outbound, ABM.
There is, because if you think about expansion is two things. It's first pipeline generation, and then it's pipeline management. So if we have an expansion opportunity, we are either going to follow the same exact process that we do for new business, or we are going to answer the same questions we answered about new business pipeline management and just have slightly different answers. We might have slightly different stages. We might have different qualification criteria, et cetera. But if anybody is listening to this and they want to pull up the framework and try to understand, well, how do we figure out how to manage our expansion pipeline? You just go to the pipeline efficiency pyramid and all the questions that you need to answer are right there. So when we think about the expansion pyramid, I'm really thinking about like expansion pipeline generation, right? And so we obviously need to know our ICP and our buyer personas by product. And where that's like specific, like I'll share a tangible example at Salesforce is like, okay, well, our ICP was, these industries. And then within that, like, well, the sales leader bought Sales Cloud and the service leader bought Service Cloud and the marketing leader bought Marketing Cloud, like kind of obvious, right? But like, if it wasn't obvious, it's important to know that. And I'll say like, actually one thing that wasn't obvious is, it's a little bit misleading because what we found is like our buyer persona for Service Cloud was actually not the head of, customer success. It was oftentimes the COO. For whatever reason, the head of customer success, like, unfortunately, oftentimes gets neglected and didn't have as much power in the organization to drive buying decisions. And we found that it was a lot easier to go to the COO. So what do we need to know in order to do this? Specifically, how do we define the expansion process? We look at customer journey map, capacity and territory planning, account scoring and assignment, the account sequencing process, and then the last thing is product and stakeholder whitespace. Let me dig into that a little bit. So a lot of these things are repetitive, but I think the account scoring and assignment is going to be really critical. Like, how do we take all of these signals and figure out which accounts we want to go after? It could be as simple as, hey, we've pulled up our backend database. We've gone through, who's using our product, and we've identified a set of green accounts, and we've done that manually. And like, we're going to go after those green accounts and try to see if we can expand them. It could be much more complicated than that, but that's a good place to start, right? Once we've done that, how do we want to reach out to them? Do we reach out to one person, to 5 people in the organization? When I was at Salesforce, there were probably about 8 people in an organization that I would reach out to on a regular basis. And then that leads us into product and stakeholder white space. Which products does each customer have? Which products does each customer not have? That's a common thing. But also, what's our stakeholder white space? When I was at Salesforce, we would oftentimes have a good relationship with the VP of sales or the CRO, but oftentimes not necessarily with the CMO, with the head of customer success, especially not with the CFO, CEO, COO, Salesforce admin, etc. And so if you have these relationships in these accounts that were like or these people in these accounts that you don't have relationships with, it can be really powerful to map that out and work to change that.
All right, so we have covered a lot in this framework, and I know it might sound a little bit overwhelming to get through all that, but where should revenue leaders actually start?
I think the first place to start is so we've given 7 different pyramids and a lot to inspect. The first place to start is with prioritization. So we're going to turn this into a framework. It's currently a newsletter, the Go-to-Market Ops Decision Tree. It starts with a basic question. If you could improve one thing in your business over the next 90 days, would it be new business or net revenue retention? I should say one thing in go-to-market, not in the business. Would it be new business or net revenue retention? Okay, let's say it's new business. Next question. If you could improve one thing in new business over the next 90 days, what would it be? Would it be generating more pipeline or closing more of the pipeline that you're already generating? And on our side, I would say, is it retention or is it expansion? And then we drill a layer deeper, right? So with pipeline generation, if that's what we landed on, is it one of these channels that we mentioned? Is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it ABM Allbound? Is it partners or channel? Or is it the ones we didn't cover, PLG or community? Which one is it? When you center in on that, then you can pull up the pyramid and you could say, okay, we've landed on pipeline management and outbound as our top 2 priorities for the next 90 days. Do we have the fundamentals in place? Do we have the adoption in place? You answer those questions really quickly, and then you translate that into a go-to-market operations roadmap. And you say, these are the specific things that we want to improve over the next 90 days. So what does that mean? The way we like to do a go-to-market operations roadmap is we say on the left, what are our OKRs, our objectives and key results? For example, we say we want to generate $120 million of pipeline. Okay, in order to do that, we need to better define our ICP and our buyer personas. We need to, let me go back to our outbound pyramid. We need to do a capacity plan and a territory plan. We need to build out and segment our target lists. And we need to define our prospect sequencing process, assuming that we have none of the stuff in place or none of it's good, right? Okay, our objective is to generate, I don't remember what I said, $100 million in pipeline. And in order to increase our chances of being able to do that, these are the initiatives we need to take down in go-to-market operations. We put this all on one sheet of paper, and you can find this on our website. And then we present this to the leadership team, and they say, yep, we agree with this, or we would change this in this way. And then we all commit to say, for the next 90 days, this is the top priority. If anything else comes up, it's literally the house has to be burning down, or the answer is no, we need to focus on this. And that's really, really powerful. It's so common that operations gets inundated with these inbound requests. And then we had the best intentions to go improve our outbound engine, but we never made any traction on it because operations got distracted, or because we got the fundamentals in place, but management never drove adoption. Management never committed to getting the team to execute the process consistently. And so it's really important that we get this all on one page and get everybody to agree and sign off on it and then go work on it. And then lastly, at least the way we work, we do biweekly sprints. And so it's nice to break that 90-day plan down into a 2-week sprint and say, okay, over the next 2 weeks, we're working on the capacity and territory plan.
Mm-hmm. And having this air cover of a plan that that the CEO and the rest of your CXOs have signed off on, when somebody else on your team comes to you and they're like, oh, I need you to work on this other thing instead. It's an emergency. It's super urgent. You can come to them and be like, okay, well, is it more urgent than this thing that the CEO has signed off on as being most urgent? Or is it, something that can be kicked down the road a little bit for a week? So it's easier to triage stuff when you have that air cover.
It's very important. I would say it's probably even more important when we think about first line management, right? So if, for example, our roadmap is that we're going to fix pipeline management and outbound, we need management to inspect those reports and drive the team to have their pipeline clean and well managed and to execute the outbound process. That's a big ask, right? So we need everyone aligned. We need the CRO behind it saying, I'm going to work with my frontline management team, or maybe the CRO is frontline management, and I'm going to commit that we are going to do this and we're going to drive our team to adopt this process that we're going to define.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
this is make or break for go-to-market.
Yeah. Well,
All right, we're at time. Is that what you're going to say?
That's exactly. Yeah, we're right up at time. So yeah, thank you guys also for making it this far. If you want to see the framework with your own eyes, you can go to unisquareconsulting.com/frameworks or find the link in the show notes. That is the Go-to-Market Efficiency Pyramid Framework 3.0. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Thank you for doing this, all the hard work that you put into putting this whole thing together and asking these questions. I'm very excited to release this, and I hope that people got a lot of value out of it. I will also plug one more thing. If anybody's listening to this and you're saying, I would like some help figuring this stuff out, we have a go-to-market efficiency workshop, and either I or our head of delivery would run this, and you can go to our website and you can book a session. It's a pretty significant investment of time for us. It's free, but you have to be a chief revenue officer or you have to have your CRO there in a company with $50 to $500 million in ARR. And we will spend an hour doing a free diagnostic and assessment of your entire go-to-market, or we'll end up centering in on one thing that's specific and most important to you and help you leave with some tangible action items that you can take to improve your go-to-market efficiency.
And we will have the link to that workshop in the show notes as well. Or you can find it on our website at the time of this recording. It's under resources and free workshop.
Awesome, Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.